We asked General Z for their thoughts on Michael Jackson ID. Reed's film is specific in that it frames Wade Robson and James Safechuck, who both allege that Jackson sexually abused them as minors, at its center. Is not so much, of course, the focus in all this should on sexual abuse survivors. However, for those that grew up while Jackson was still alive and at the height of his powers, the impact that the documentary may have on his legacy feels important. It's why, yet, there's a whole generation of music lovers who, because of their age, won't remember a time before Michael Jackson was dead. They won't remember. I still remember where I was when I heard that he had died, recalls 19-year-old Elise Schaefer, a student at Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois. It's one of my more. Elise says that she had no idea about the history of child sexual abuse allegations against Jackson until she saw Leaving Neverland. I heard people the documentary, she says, left her floored and without doubt that Jackson abused children. But still, Sophie Williams from Cardiff is 18 and describes herself as a lifelong fan of Jackson. I simply cannot. I think the younger generation have a tendency to realize the severity of the allegations more, while the older generation's connections to Michael Jackson make them far more biased and unwilling to let him go. Sophie, however, is unsure whether the documentary will totally cancel the singer, but believes that his name will always have a disclaimer next to it. As a lot of these do, 23-year-old Noura Eklef does recall the very public 2005 trial brought against the singer accusing him of child molestation. I recall, however, Noura explains that she hasn't watched all of Leaving Neverland because it's a very hard watch, but she is convinced of Jackson's guilt. I tend to go down. Caitlin McMillan, an 18-year-old from Wales, also says that she won't listen to Jackson's music again and believes that the younger generation will now reject him and his music. I think the younger, 24-year-old, who wished to remain anonymous after already encountering Jackson fans on Twitter, says that while he is heartbroken by the documentary, he's not convinced that it will change how the singer is viewed in the future. The Jackson estate. Indeed, 19-year-old Alex Dawson-Benson from London says that, because Jackson is dead, she hasn't watched Leaving Neverland. He can't defend. Beth, who is 18, doesn't share this ideology, but she says that some of her peers do. You have people. Only Phoebe, a 22-year-old from Bedfordshire, says that she feels able to separate the art from the artist in this case. I am completely. What everyone I spoke to did agree on was the precarious nature of cancel culture, especially where personal responsibility and accountability lies within that arena. In the case of Jack, speaking to these young people leaves no doubt that the adoration once bestowed upon Jackson has officially ended, no matter how much the fans and the estate conspire and protest. The man once dubbed
Raindrop, drop top, smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.